So yesterday, Israel finished a 12-day war that it launched against Iran to make sure that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons and won't be a threat to the Jewish people and to the only Jewish state in the world that protects Jews all over the world. And the name that Prime Minister Netanyahu gave to this war, as we spoke about, was Am Klavi, a nation of lionesses. And this comes from the prophecy of Bilam, which we're going to read in a few weeks. When he blesses the Jewish people, instead of cursing them, he says that they are a nation of lionesses, but lioness in the feminine. An Ari would be a lion in the male, and a lioness is Klavi in the female. And why, of course, did he call it that? Because when we think about the Jewish people, we think about the power and the resilience of the Jewish woman. Their strength, their courage, their perseverance, and what has gotten us to where we are today. In fact, in this week's Torah portion, when we read about the rebellion of Korach, the Torah says that Korach went in his instigation against Moses. The first person he went and he approached was their neighbors, the tribe of Reuven, and he went to a man named On ben Peles. And he rabble-roused him against Moses, and he said, "Come join me." And On ben Peles joins. But later, when God punishes Korach and the group, On ben Peles is nowhere to be found. And the rabbis tell us something remarkable. You know what saved On ben Peles? It was his wife. His wife realized that Korach was up to no good. His wife realized that when Korach said, "Everyone is holy, you all deserve leadership," that she didn't mean her husband and the Jewish people. Korach just meant himself. So what did she do? She knew that her husband was riled up by Korach and she wouldn't be able to stop him. She got her husband drunk and he fell asleep. And when Korach and his people came to get her husband, she stood at the entrance of the tent and she refused to let anyone in. And therefore, by that, saving her husband from Korach and his evil ideas. Another way of looking at the remarkable Jewish woman. You know, 5 years ago, Grunie decided to relaunch our women's events and our women's group that we have at Chabad, which is very popular. And if you look at our website, there's so many big events happening and groups, etc. And she thought hard and long, what should we name this group of Jewish women? And at the end, the name she gave it was Leviot, which means the plural for the woman lioness. And if you go now, you could see our site, leviot.org, which is already 5 or 6 years old. And Grunie named it that. And today, when you think about what was named the war that Israel fought against Iran, it was named Am Klavi, a woman of lionesses. Because if you think about the last 2 years, especially since October 7th, the heroics of the women and the way they have stood and held ground in a nation where the men were fighting in Gaza, and then in Lebanon, and then in Iran, the women were the cornerstone, the foundation of what makes our nation tick and what made Israel not just survive in the last 2 years, but thrive. In fact, Israel's stock market reached the pinnacle, the highest ever. The growth, people moving to Israel, and the spirit of the Jewish people, even in the last days, have been remarkable. In fact, one of the things that gave me so much hope and courage through this was I saw this article about all these babies that were born during this 12 days in bomb shelters in the Rambam hospital. They have an underground unit for a time of war, and you see all these mothers with babies. And someone went and bought these mothers a bunch of onesies for their babies that said Livia, which means a lioness in the singular. Like Leviot is the plural, Livia. And you saw the mothers with all their kids standing there and smiling. That's the spirit of the Jewish people. That's what saved On ben Peles, was his wife. And that's what saved the Jewish people over the past 2 years and throughout our history. was the Jewish woman. In fact, we say in the merit of the Jewish woman, we were redeemed from exile in Egypt, and in their merit we will have the ultimate redemption. What more do we need than that? That the ultimate redemption that God will send to the Jewish people will be in merit of the woman. And for me to realize that Grunie thought of this name years ago and named our women's group at Chabad at Chestnut Hill the Leviot, and made a website, a beautiful website, leviot.org. And today, one of the most heroic and remarkable wars that Israel had in 12 days is called Am Klavi, a woman of lionesses. May Hashem give us that we should appreciate the woman, the foundations of who we are, and the strength of the woman, the faith of the woman should bring us the ultimate redemption speedily in our days. Have a great